Last week, there was a Chinese spy balloon, which was allowed to keep flying over the US for 40 minutes before the government did anything about it.
Unidentified object shot down by fighter jets,
which absolutely blew up the headlines. But now, there was another unidentified flying object which has been shot down over Alaska. Let's see what's up.
just miles off the coast of Alaska yesterday. Unlike the Chinese spy balloon shot down last Saturday, this object demanded more immediate action yesterday.
So with the Chinese spy balloon, they waited, but with this one, they shot it down almost immediately. That must mean that this one posed a much bigger threat, or that they're already on higher alert.
Officials say it was flying much lower at 40,000 feet, making it a dangerous potential threat to civilian aircraft.
Oh, there you go. Since it was flying much lower, it could have collided with an airplane flying like passengers, so that's why they decided to deal with it immediately. Good call.
But now we are learning that U.S. military pilots who approached the craft have given conflicting accounts of what they saw. This new reporting coming in now from CNN national security reporter Natasha Bertrand.
Let's see what Natasha has to say.
Natasha, so this is interesting. This is kind of unusual that these pilots saw different things, and that is sort of, I guess, adding to the mystery of all this.
Yeah, not even the pilots apparently were really able to identify what they saw. And just to take you back for a sec.
Okay, I'm not saying it's aliens, but it is sounding like aliens.
On Thursday, the U.S. defense officials sent F-35 fighter jets up to try to figure out what this object was that was flying around near Alaska. Those pilots, we have learned, have given very conflicting accounts of what they actually experienced, with some pilots saying that the object interfered with the plane's sensors, other pilots saying that they didn't really experience that, other pilots saying that when they looked at the object, they could identify no identifiable propulsion system, and they did not know how it was actually staying in the air, cruising at that altitude of about 40,000 feet. So this has all added to the Pentagon's wariness of describing in more detail what this object actually is until they can get more information through the debris that they are recovering right now.
All right, so we had two graphics there which are really interesting. Let's look at the first one. Point number one, it's flying at 40,000 feet, which is close to where civilian aircraft is. Dangerous. Number two, apparently it wasn't any kind of spy mission because they couldn't find any kind of surveillance equipment on the thing. Three, it was about the size of a small car, which is pretty much the size of a very, very small aircraft. They say it was unmanned and did not appear to be self-maneuvering. Either aliens or a drone. And it was shot down by an F22 fighter jet over frozen water off Alaska. That's significant. I don't know how much you know about jets, but basically their current top of the line jet is the F-35, and the F-35 they're making and they're selling it to their allies, and it's an extremely advanced aircraft. But as good as that aircraft is, before, the Americans had the F-22, and the F-22 was never sold outside of the United States, so only to the Pentagon and other military contractors. And that's because the F-22 is still the absolute best dogfighting jet in the US's arsenal, and they don't want to share how they made such a good jet. To put it into perspective, the F-22 has never been shot down in a combat mission. And so the fact that they scrambled an F-22 instead of an F-35 is actually quite significant because they expected that there might be aerial combat happening. Otherwise, they would have scrambled an F-35 instead to collect more data on the UFO. And then we have the timeline. So Thursday evening, they detected the object. Friday morning, they told Biden about it. Friday, around lunchtime, it was already shot down. Now, while that sounds like an aggressive timeline, it probably means that the trajectory of the aircraft didn't seem like it was headed for any kind of civilian targets or anything like that, because otherwise they would have shot it down within the first hour. So I don't know what was going on there, but probably it was just like flying in circles above Alaska, and they were like, well, you know, there's not much in Alaska. Let's see what happens before we tell Biden about it. Then it started acting sus, and Biden was like, yo, take this down, especially since he was already receiving bad press for letting the Chinese spy balloon be up for so long.
And what do we know about the efforts to recover the wreckage of this second object? It looks like NORAD just put out an email a short time ago, and it sounds like they're trying to recover it.
They did, and what we were told yesterday is that the object was shot down over frozen water, so it landed on the ice, essentially.
That's actually worse when something lands on the ice. I mean, it does make it easier to find the individual pieces because, you know, searching the surface is much easier than searching the bottom of the ocean. But when something impacts frozen ice, it's even more likely to just explode and shatter and destroy all the components. That's already going to happen when you hit water, but on ice it's even more. So the destruction is even higher of the aircraft and its components.
We don't know what kind of condition it's in, whether it is intact, for example, but recovery efforts have been launched, and according to the Defense Department, they have been able to recover a significant amount of debris. Now, notably, they still don't know what this object is, where it came from, or even what direction it was headed in, or what direction it came from. It is just all very murky at this point, but they do say that the FBI is going to be taking the lead on analyzing the debris. If that sounds familiar, it's because just last week we saw that another Chinese spy balloon, I should say a Chinese spy balloon because we don't know what this one actually is,
right,
was shot down, also being analyzed by the FBI.
So that's actually really interesting that they have the FBI leading the investigation on this, because usually UFO investigations are carried out exclusively by the Air Force. So the fact that they have the FBI on it probably means that they think most likely it was some kind of foreign surveillance attempt. So here's the big difference between the CIA and the FBI. The CIA is only allowed to collect data about foreign countries and their citizens, which means direct threats coming from the outside. The FBI has some jurisdiction to do that too, but additionally they have full jurisdiction to investigate any kind of threat coming from within the US. And literally, if you go to the website, ding, you see that the CIA is prohibited from collecting information about aliens, but the FBI is allowed. I'm just saying, throwing some alien conspiracies into the video here to make sure that the retention stays up. Back to Natasha.
But right now, there are just so many more questions than answers, Jim.
Yeah, and as the hours go on, it gets more and more mysterious. All right, Natasha Bertrand, thank you very much. Let's bring in former CIA operative Bob Baer. Bob, I mean, this is starting to sound like something out of the X-Files. I don't want to get carried away here, but what do you make of these different assessments coming in from the pilots of what they saw?
So they say the FBI is leading the operation, but then they bring in a CIA guy? What?
Well, Jim, the speed of those airplanes, F-35s, it's no wonder they all saw different things. And as far as intercepting communications to that vehicle, it's very difficult.
Now we're getting conflicting things again. Now they're saying it was F-35s. CNN, please audit your reports better, because this is an absolute disaster. Now you're saying it's F-35s and my analysis from earlier is invalid. I don't even know anymore.
I don't want to get too technical, but it could be, frequency hopping, the propulsion. There's so many questions out there that you're absolutely right. Not until they actually go through the debris and see what it's made of and what it looks like in the communications. Obviously, there was some sort of propulsion system that was driving that vehicle. And don't forget, NORAD with Doppler radar is probably going back and looking at where it came from and see if they can track it back to, I don't know, China, Russia, wherever. But it's a great mystery. I'm absolutely fascinated by this.
Has this guy run for mayor? Because he is an expert at giving an answer that sounds like an answer that doesn't actually give you any usable information.
Yeah, I mean, one U.S. official tells us there was no obvious surveillance equipment on board. Some of this is the initial information, initial reporting that comes in, and I suppose things change as they assess what they have on the ground or on the ice there. What does that tell you if that ends up being the case?
Well, there's a couple of things that I take away from this. And if it's a foreign-made object and it was sent from a place like China or Russia, it's some sort of provocation against us. I can't imagine a vehicle like this would give the Chinese or the Russians a real intelligence advantage of collecting photographs or signals or things like that. But I think what bothers NORAD and the White House is these probes. We now know there was, a total of 5 balloons, Chinese balloons that have come over the United States.
All right, now we're talking about the balloon scan. Mate, the balloons was last week. We want to know about the UFOs. Stop dodging the questions. At some point, you think he's playing for the US Dodgers.
Why are the Chinese doing this? Who's ordering it? And why would you do it right before Blinken, the Secretary of State, is on his way to Beijing? That makes no sense to me. With the balloon, was the Chinese military struck out on its own? So all of these questions, analysts at the CIA and the White House are looking through this and trying to piece this together. Remember, these balloons are flying over 40 places across the world, these Chinese balloons, and there are a lot of aerial vehicles I've been involved in before we've never been able to identify from radar. One we saw, I remember I was involved in, was going Mach 6, which made no sense at all to anybody, and eventually it was just shelved and we couldn't figure it out.
Mach 6? Mach 6 makes absolutely no sense. The SR-71 Blackbird was only flying at Mach 3. only, and that's one of the fastest aircrafts ever made. So it's not likely that that was an aircraft. That's actually more likely to be a missile, because missiles can fly faster. Missiles can be between 5 and 25 times the speed of sound, which is Mach 5 and Mach 25.
And I guess, the question that you're leading me to with the comments on China is that we have one of two situations, I suppose. One is they're just trying to provoke the U.S. to see what the response might be. The other would be that Xi and the military might not be on the same page, that the folks who want to try to conduct diplomacy with the United States are not on the same page as the military.
Exactly. The People's Liberation Army is very difficult to understand, and would they act in non-accordance with Xi? We don't know.
Okay, so basically what this guy's saying is that it was clearly a provocation from the Chinese. We don't know if it was from the CCP or if it was just a military general operating like quote unquote independently right before a Secretary of State visit from the US to China, trying to cause some kind of drama for whatever diplomatic reason. Let's face it, that's the most likely thing.
I mean, is China close to some sort of military takeover with all these COVID protocols that close down the economy? These are very hard questions to answer. And for American intelligence, getting inside these circles is nearly impossible. It's always been impossible. But it's certainly something the analysts are picking through right now.
We keep getting more and more and more confirmed reports about UFOs. It's pretty interesting. Not saying it's aliens, but check out the next video in case it is aliens, and make sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell, because if we're getting invaded, I'll be sure to inform you guys.